24/7 news source, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
Heading Glendale towards Griffith Park on the 134 West. As you get towards that 5, we have a crash that's going to be onto the right shoulder here. That is busy to commute from at least Brand Boulevard. There was a stalled vehicle west 134 around Hollywood Way, Alameda. That is sitting on the right side. Trouble's clearing on the 405 south of the 105. A wreck from earlier through Inglewood onto the right shoulder. As you get to Howard Hughes Parkway, the busy commute. The 405 north at Burbank Boulevard in the Valley. There's a wreck towards the off-ramp through here.
Need an accident attorney by your side? All you got to do is call the accident guys.
Injured in a car accident or at work? Call the accident guys. Because unlike other firms, an attorney will negotiate your case, not a paralegal.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
When people talk during the NBA season about the best teams in the Western Conference, the Golden State Warriors, Phoenix Suns, and even the Memphis Grizzlies were always mentioned before the Denver Nuggets. The Nuggets ended up being the best team in the West, and now they are NBA champs for the first time in the franchise's 47-year history. The Nuggets closed out Miami in 5 games with a 5-point win. Nikola Jokic was named Finals MVP. Jokic is the first player to lead the NBA playoffs in points, rebounds, and assists. Props to Rams owner Stan Kroenke, who also owns the Nuggets. He's the first owner to see his team win an NBA title, a Super Bowl, and a Stanley Cup title. Kroenke's Colorado Avalanche won the NHL championship in 2022. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
We begin top story with late-breaking news.
Is it going to succeed, yes or no?
I think it's going to succeed. It's going to succeed.
Can you believe it?
Y'all did it!
KBLA Talk 1580 is about to celebrate its 2nd anniversary on Juneteenth, and no terrible twos around here. We couldn't be more excited about all the good news we'll be announcing soon, including the launch of some new shows to keep giving you more of what you've been looking for.
Come on!
Smart radio for smart people. Hey, it's our celebration, but you get all the gifts. We'll be giving away fresh merch, swag bags, and a chance for you to join the private invitation-only, star-studded music and dance till you drop, food and drink galore 2nd anniversary celebration. To stay in the know about the 2nd anniversary details, download the KBLA Talk 1580 app right now. Don't miss out on your chance to be a winner. At KBLA Talk 1580, when we come forward, we're bringing everybody with us.
Happy anniversary, KBLA!
Life was bitter to the core. There was nothing to live for until love came. And even second times around, happiness could not be found until love came. I was left all alone.
My heart was breaking.
Thought it was my own. Tears cover me.
Through the whole night.
And I need some relief.
Joy comes in the morning.
Been searching for the keys to life's door. Brought to my knees.
Savior, can you help me?
And was led to
I'll
believe
tell you I was too
that his love showed me. Love said not so. Even with the odds against me, love showed me. Love said not so.
Even with the odds against me, love said not so. One of my favorite BB and CC tracks. We're celebrating the music of BB and CC Winans today. Why? Because June is Black Music Month, and every day this month we are featuring the music of iconic African-American artists, and we've done a little bit of everybody from Dizzy Gillespie to Prince. But today we celebrate the song stylings of BB and CC Winans, part of a majorly talented family out of Detroit, and BB and CC got hits. Together, individually, we'll play some of the best of their stuff together and, again, apart as we move through the 3 hours of this program. Once again, June, Black Music Month, and just imagine your life without black artists, black musical artists on the soundtrack of it. I can assure you, without black folk on your soundtrack, it would fall flat, completely flat. But I digress. Love Said Not So by BB and CC Winans. in this hour, I've been waiting on this. It's been far too long since I've been in conversation with my friend and brilliant scholar, Reza Aslan. So here's the question. How seriously do we take our American ideals of constitutional democracy, and whose freedom do we truly support? A conversation in this hour, for the hour, about a little known martyr named Howard Baskerville and how one person's actions can have revolutionary consequences that reverberate indeed the world over. Baskerville's remarkable journey to justice, freedom, equality, and self determination, I suspect, will inspire you if you stick around for the hour. Now that we are joined by the author of the acclaimed book, he's got a number of them, but his most recently acclaimed book is called An American Martyr in Persia: The Epic Life and Tragic Death of Howard Baskerville. Reza Aslan, been far too long, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing well, Tavis. It has been too long. It's great to be speaking with you again.
It is great to hear your voice again. You're well? Your family's well?
We're well, yeah. Just getting ready for the LA summer.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a hot one this year.
Yeah. Yes. Funny you say that. We just had a conversation in our first hour about the climate change and global warming and all that we're seeing, courtesy of these wildfires in Canada blowing across our borders, and had a fascinating conversation, which I know you would have appreciated. About I said to our guest, Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, said to him that all of our conversation in this country politically is always about our southern border. Ain't nobody talking about the northern border. And now, we see the ways in which what's happening at the northern border is impacting all of us a great deal more than somebody running across a border to get a job that you don't want anyway. But I digress on that point. No, it is likely going to be a long, hot summer in L.A., and not just in L.A., all across this country as we see temperatures continue to rise. But again, we spent time talking about that in hour one, and now I'm glad to have you on in hour two to talk about Howard Baskerville. Let me just start by asking this. I'm always fascinated. I've written a few books in my own time, as you know. I'm always fascinated about how authors, how scholars like you choose certain subject matter. How did this subject matter rise to the top of your list?
It's funny. This is a story that I've always wanted to tell. The story of Howard Baskerville is one that I feel like I've always known as a child. I mean, Baskerville, when I was growing up in Iran, was a heroic, I would say, mythic character. He was this 22-year-old Christian missionary who, in 1907, went to what was then called Persia, what we now call Iran, in order to preach the gospel and teach English. And he just happened to have arrived in the middle of the first democratic revolution in the Middle East. We call it the Constitutional Revolution of 1905. This was a period in which young Iranian men and women were clamoring onto the streets, asking for the creation of a constitution, a document that would lay out all the rights and privileges of every citizen in the country, and for the creation of a parliament, a legislative body that would not just be able to pass laws, but more importantly, to curb the unchecked authority of the Shah. And Baskerville, I mean, it's a long, fascinating, amazing story, but the 2 years that he was in Iran and this transformation that he underwent, in which at the end of his life he gave up his missionary position, he gave up his American citizenship, and he reconstituted his students into a militia and fought alongside the Iranians against the Shah for their freedom, and then ultimately died this kind of heroic martyrdom death. That has made him a hero in Iran for the last century. And when I was growing up, I mean, there were schools named Howard Baskerville. There were auditoriums named after him, streets named after him. His grave, which is still in Tabriz, the city in which he lived and died, was a kind of pilgrimage site. And every year on the anniversary of his death, April 19th, people would gather at his grave. Iranians would gather at his grave and pay homage to this American Christian missionary who died for Iran. I mean, that sounds bizarre, doesn't it? I mean, from what you know about Iran. And so this story has always just been so fascinating to me. It's a story I've always wanted to tell, and finally, I think the time came to be able to do it.
Yeah, I want to talk more about Howard Baskerville as we move through this hour. And let me tell you why I wanted to have Reza on, in case you're trying to figure out what this has to do with you. I think there's some fascinating parallels to unpack in this hour because we in the African American community have a powerful legacy of fighting for our own civil rights and equality. As we fought for ourselves, others have been the beneficiaries of that in this place called America. And so we understand the significance of solidarity, activism, and the pursuit of justice in a way that most communities do not. And so it's in that spirit that I wanted to invite Reza on to learn more about Howard Baskerville and sort of draw some parallels between Baskerville's journey and the experiences of black folk in this country, highlighted by the shared, I think, aspirations of freedom, equality, self-determination, and more. I look forward to the rest of this hour with Reza Aslan when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
I said ain't no smiling faces, no smiling faces. Ain't nobody crying, no more crying. If you're ready now, some more. I'll take you there. Lord, say if you're ready.
We've got a lot to talk about. Good thing we've got 3 hours. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
Hey LA, keep your utility bills low this summer while making your home the cool place to be. LADWP can help you save hundreds with air conditioner and thermostat rebates, plus free energy efficient home upgrades and simple tips to help you beat the heat and save money. Visit ladwp.com/cool-LA.
When you're young, life is full of choices. Don't let opioids like highly addictive and deadly fentanyl take away your life and your choices with just one wrong pill. Addiction is a disease that can affect anyone at any age, but there is a choice to get help for this disease. Find medically proven treatment options, including virtual, at choosemat.org.
Whether you own a local business or a global one, you're always looking for ways to position your operation to create opportunities and move on them faster. With Bank of America, you get access to experts, award-winning insights, and business solutions so powerful, you'll make every move matter, locally and globally. Visit bankofamerica.com/banking for business to learn more. What would you like the power to do? Copyright 2023 Bank of America, N.A.
As a dentist, I know what my patients are saying when they really can't speak. She says her gums have been bleeding. Is there anything you can do? Absolutely. You can try New Crest Gum Detoxify and Restore. Yup, New Crest Gum Detoxify and Restore is professionally designed to start healing gums from day one. Right. Healthy gums, healthy mouth.
Crest Gum Detoxify and Restore. Smile. Crest has you covered.
My milkshake brings all the boys to the yard, and they're like, it's better than yours.
Spilled your milkshake? Quick, the quicker picker upper. Bounty picks up spills quicker. And each sheet is 2 times more absorbent, so you can use less than the leading Ordinary brand. So you can get back to your milkshake.
My milkshake brings all the boys to the yard, and they're like, it's better than yours.
Bounty, the quicker picker upper.
Interrogating your assumptions and expanding your inventory of ideas. Let's get back to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Tavis Smiley. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580. Our phone number 1-800-920-1580, 1-800-920-1580. Glad to have you tuned in this hour as we talk with renowned Emmy and Peabody-nominated scholar and best-selling author Reza Aslan, offering us a profound exploration of some serious questions through the lens of Howard Baskerville's life and sacrifice, a little-known martyr who had a remarkable impact on the democratic revolution in Iran, and the parallels between Howard Baskerville's sacrifice there and the sacrifice of black folk and others here. So delighted to have Reza Aslan on in this hour. All right, Reza, we got some time now, the rest of the hour for that matter. So tell me a bit more about Howard Baskerville, and we'll jump from there.
He was born in Nebraska. He came from a long line of Presbyterian preachers. His father, his grandfather, his uncle, his older brother, all of them had gone into the ministry, and that was what was expected of him. Mm-hmm. He followed in his father's footsteps and went to Princeton, where he studied Christian ministry. And then, when he graduated in 1907, I think he wanted to have an adventure first, right? He knew that eventually he was going to have to go back. His family was living in South Dakota at that point. He knew he was going to have to go back to South Dakota and eventually take up a preaching job. But, he was part of this generation that was kind of the first real generation of what we now refer to as evangelical Christians, right? Mm-hmm. He wanted to convert the world. He wanted to go out into, those dark and foreign and exotic reaches of the planet and to bring the gospel to those who had not heard it. He really, really wanted to go to China or Japan. It's a very funny story. He had written a number of letters to the Presbyterian Board of Foreign Missions asking to be placed in China and Japan, but the missions board had a different idea for him, and they wanted him to go to Persia, which is someplace that he absolutely did not want to go. He had read a lot of these missionary reports about Persia, talking about it as this, just terrible place. One of my absolute favorite missionary reports from the time called Persia, a place where, quote, all the sins of the Decalogue are ever present. And so, he'd been really scared about the Mohammedans, the solid wall of Mohammedanism, as they referred to it. But when you're a missionary and the church says we're sending you to so-and-so place, you don't really have much to say about it. So reluctantly, he went off to Persia, arrived in the fall of 1907, and really just discovered that everything that he'd been told about the country and its people were a lie. Absolutely fell in love with the Persians, the culture, the food, obviously. Instantly became the most popular teacher at this missionary school in the city of Tabriz in the northwest of the country. Partly that had to do with the fact that he was by far the youngest teacher. But he really developed this deep love and affection for the country and its people, and especially his students. What he, I think, didn't realize when he was heading to Persia is that he was walking into a revolution that had begun about 2 years earlier, and which actually before he arrived had achieved some success. The Shah of Iran had given to the demands of the people. He had allowed for a constitution to be written, a progressive document actually, setting forth, not just the rights and privileges of the citizens, but giving the freedom of speech, freedom of religion. And then also there was already an election for the first parliament, this legislative body that would now have, the right to kind of control and curb the autocratic tendencies of the Shah. The problem, however, is that about 3 days after signing that constitution and allowing for elections, the Shah died. Mm-hmm. And his son, this kind of 36-year-old, really terrible. Listen, I'm Iranian. I can tell you, we had some miserable SOBs sit on that throne in Iran. But this guy took the cake. He, grew up believing that the country was his by birthright. He was incensed with his father for having dared to, give up any of his God-given authority. And almost immediately, he launched a war against the revolutionaries. He actually brought his Russian-made cannons up to the parliament building and blew it up with the parliamentarians still inside. They were in the middle of a session, and he just blew up the building. And then he used his Russian-trained troops to essentially conquer every city in Iran back for the crown, every city except for the city of Tabriz in the northwest, which is the city that Howard Baskerville suddenly arrives in.
Yeah. Tell me how, I was just thinking as you were talking about these parallels I referenced earlier about blowing up things with people inside. If that ain't the story of black folk in America, I don't know what is, right? Starting with the 16th Street Baptist Church and other places we could identify and will as we move through this hour, talk about these parallels, again, between the sacrifice and struggle of Howard Baskerville there and what the black community has done here. But I'll put a pin in that for the moment. What I want to get to is how an evangelical Christian goes to Iran, goes to Persia of all places, and gets converted. His mission, as you mentioned earlier, was to convert the world. He goes there and he gets converted. And let me just say this: whenever we hear these stories about conversion, and you probably know where I'm going here. Whenever we hear the conversion of any American Christian, it's always a conversion to the worst. It's always a conversion to the other side, and they end up fighting America. They end up becoming sympathetic to terrorist activity themselves. Here's a guy who's an evangelical Christian, but has a different kind of conversion, if you take my point. How does that happen?
That's right. Well, it's funny, he was young, he was politically, active and intelligent, and he arrives in this city full of people who are just like him, 20-year-olds who are willing to sacrifice their lives for the freedom and democracy that Baskerville just took for granted back in the States. So almost immediately he gets deeply involved in the politics of the revolution. However, he is told in no uncertain terms by the church that sent him to Persia in the first place, by the school that's employing him there in order to teach and preach the gospel, and most importantly by the U.S. government, that this is none of his business, that he can have absolutely nothing to do with what's happening here. The church tells him, you are there to save souls, not lives. That's not your concern. The U.S. government, interestingly enough, didn't have any kind of political position on the revolution. It's not like they were in bed with the Shah or anything. In fact, at this point, 1907, the U.S. government probably couldn't even pick out Persia on a map. But they were also absolutely 100% convinced that the idea of a true democratic state arising in a Muslim majority state was so ridiculous, was so laughable, was so impossible that no American could possibly have anything to do with it. And so they made it very clear to the missionaries in Iran that any interference in the affairs of Persia would be considered an act of treason against the United States, which is a big deal.
Wow, yeah.
So here's all this pressure on him to say, none of your business, none of your business. This is not about you. You can have nothing to do with this. But I think what's really fascinating about Baskerville and what makes him worth writing about is that he truly believed that as an American and as a Christian, it was his duty to fight for the rights and the freedoms of these Muslim Iranians, who didn't share his religion, didn't share his culture, didn't share his skin color, spoke a different language, were in so many ways different from him, and yet in the only way that actually mattered, were the same.
Yeah.
And ultimately, he was willing to defy all of those people and to actually join this revolution.
I want to circle back to something you said about 4 minutes ago, because there was a sort of, how about I put it, I felt this sort of cognitive dissonance in this very simple phrase, that he was there to save souls, not lives. I don't need to color that much more for you. You're a scholar. But when I say cognitive dissonance, really? Save souls, but not lives, Reza?
That's right. Yeah, that was the missionary sort of primary goal. Remember, this was a time at the beginning of the 20th century in which, certainly for the Presbyterian Church, they had only been sending missionaries out into the world for about 30 years or so, 30, 40 years. It was a fairly new enterprise. And they had missionaries in China. They had missionaries in Russia. They had missionaries, in all these parts of the world where, obviously, politically speaking, culturally speaking, quite different than the United States. And the missionary code was very clear. You are there to preach the gospel. Now, yes, you can, help build schools and help educate the population. And yes, of course, we're going to use our resources to feed people, and we're going to build hospitals. But all of it is in the service of converting people to Protestant evangelical Christianity. That it's not an end in and of itself. It's a means to an end.
Yeah.
And so, especially, in the midst of this war, this revolution, that message was pounded into the heads of the missionaries. Now, I want to be clear. It's not that the missionaries didn't care about the suffering of the Persians. I mean, I quote a lot of these letters that the missionaries, Baskerville's fellow missionaries, write back home, in which they make it very clear. They understand who is the good guy and who is the bad guy in this conflict. There's no lack of moral clarity about what this revolution is about. The people are asking for their most basic rights, and the Shah is a murderous tyrant, and that all freedom-loving people know whose side you're on in this. It's none of our business.
No, I take that point. As you were talking, my mind was just trying to process the kind of evangelical Christian that Howard Baskerville was, and the kind of evangelical Christians we have to deal with, in late modernity.
You and me both, Tavis.
Yeah, in late modernity, and I can't imagine that any evangelical Christian that you and I have to tussle with, if I can put it that way, in real time, would ever do anything like what Howard Baskerville did, Reza.
It's really hard to imagine, especially a white evangelical Christian.
Yeah.
That was a huge part of it. I mean, there was a deep well of racism that was involved in the idea that what the Iranians were fighting for was just unachievable.
Yeah.
It's absurd.
Yeah.
I mean, this was the kind of language that the State Department was using. This is absurd. Muslims cannot be democratic. This is a waste of time. It's going to end eventually. There's no reason why we should expend any kind of resources or efforts supporting them. And from the Iranian side, it was really funny because especially Howard Baskerville's students, these are 16, 17-year-old kids. They're in an English language missionary school, so they tend to be a little bit more well-off. They tend to be a little bit more highly educated. And they knew far more about America than Baskerville knew about Iran. And what they absolutely understood about America is that this was a country that fought against an imperial colonizing force for its own freedoms.
Hold that thought 1 second. I don't hate to cut you off. Hold that thought 1 second. Let me get some news, traffic, and sports out of the way. Now you're headed where I want to go, because these Persian students see America through a different lens. I want to come to that and talk more broadly now that you understand more about Howard Baskerville and his struggle and sacrifice, to talk about the significance of solidarity, activism, and the pursuit of justice in this country. A great deal more to talk about with Reza Aslan when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
The station you turn to when you've had it up to here with cultural incompetence. KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Inflation is slowing. May's inflation rate was at its lowest annual rate in more than 2 years. The Labor Department says the Consumer Price Index jumped just 0.1% for the month, bringing the annual rate down to 4%. It was the smallest increase since March of 2021 when inflation started to reach historic levels. An investigation is ongoing after flyers that promoted the Ku Klux Klan were found in multiple communities across Kentucky. Residents in Mount Sterling in Paris have recently found the flyers, which appeared to be from one of the KKK's chapters. Cops in Mount Sterling say people found the flyers on their cars. Reports in Paris were made on social media but have not yet been confirmed by the city's police department. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Heading Glendale towards Griffith Park on the 134 West. As you get towards that 5, we have a crash that's going to be onto the right shoulder here. That is busy to commute from at least Brand Boulevard. There was a stalled vehicle west 134 around Hollywood Way, Alameda. That is sitting on the right side. Trouble's clearing on the 405 south of the 105. A wreck from earlier through Inglewood onto the right shoulder. As you get to Howard Hughes Parkway, the busy commute. The 405 north at Burbank Boulevard in the Valley. There's a wreck towards the off-ramp through here.
Need an accident attorney by your side? All you got to do is call the accident guys.
Injured in a car accident or at work? Call the accident guys. Because unlike other firms, an attorney will negotiate your case, not a paralegal.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
When people talk during the NBA season about the best teams in the Western Conference, the Golden State Warriors, Phoenix Suns, and even the Memphis Grizzlies were always mentioned before the Denver Nuggets. The Nuggets ended up being the best team in the West, and now they are NBA champs for the first time in the franchise's 47-year history. The Nuggets closed out Miami in 5 games with a 5-point win. Nikola Jokic was named Finals MVP. Jokic is the first player to lead the NBA playoffs in points, rebounds, and assists. Props to Rams owner Stan Kroenke, who also owns the Nuggets. He's the first owner to see his team win an NBA title, a Super Bowl, and a Stanley Cup title. Kroenke's Colorado Avalanche won the NHL championship in 2022. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Everybody now make some noise!
Is there a better day of the year to celebrate the anniversary of the only unapologetically progressive talk station west of the Mississippi, focused on issues that impact the black community?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
We think not. A station that amplifies black voices like yours with hosts and guests who look and sound like you. Celebrating our second anniversary on Juneteenth. We're KBLA Talk 1580. And you ain't seen nothing yet.
Did you know that all City of LA renters have rights? Check out these 3 facts. Residential tenants can't be evicted without reason or just cause. Eviction protection still exists for unpaid COVID-19 rental debt due before March 31st, 2023. And you have 5 days to respond to an eviction notice. 5 days. Many Angelinos may be at risk of losing their home, and that's why we want you to know your rights. Learn more at housing.lacity.org. Be informed, be protected, be at home. JP Morgan Chase is building on the investments in California and around the country to help close the racial wealth gap and build a more equitable future. As part of JP Morgan Chase commitment, they are taking action to help improve financial wealth and access to banking in the Black community, helping more people open low-cost checking and savings accounts, hosting community seminars with supporting Black-led institutions by building awareness about financial investments, hiring community managers, and opening community center branches like Crenshaw, Inglewood, and downtown LA. Visit today, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Again, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Get the tools to help reach your financial goals. Visit today, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Again, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, where hate loses and love wins.
said he'll bring me through, not yet there. Yet I can see my destination, heard his prayer. Is to be right there with you, over in the meantime. Say, I'll keep on loving. Meantime.
I'm Tavis Smiley. This is KBLA Talk 1580. Glad to have you with us in this hour. Our phone number, 1-800-920-1580, 1-800-920-1580. We continue to celebrate the rich musical legacy of the Winans family, specifically BB and CC are our artists in residence today, if you will, as we continue to celebrate June as Black Music Month here on KBLA Talk 1580. In this hour, please be joined by the brilliant scholar, Emmy and Peabody-nominated scholar, best-selling author and dear friend Reza Aslan, whose latest book is called An American Martyr in Persia, An American Martyr in Persia, The Epic Life and Tragic Death of Howard Baskerville. In case you've just tuned in, we've been talking about this young American, 22-year-old American named Howard Baskerville, a young Christian missionary who went to Iran ostensibly to preach the gospel. When he got to Iran, he ended up being converted himself, and ended up fighting with alongside many of his Persian students. Iran was known as Persia then. Ended up fighting alongside his students, and he has become iconic in that particular country. I wanted Reza on for a number of reasons, one of which we'll get to in a moment here. Now we've laid the foundation with this story about Howard Baskerville, his courage and conviction and commitment and character. Now that that's been laid, there's some powerful parallels I want to draw between how we have to engage in solidarity politics. We have to be advocates. We have to pursue justice in this country to bring about the kind of change that we want. And the story of the solidarity that Howard Baskerville found with these Persian students and the Persian public writ large is a fascinating story for me. Before we broke for news, traffic, and sports, Reza, you were starting to share with me the ways in which his Persian students saw America, the lens through which they saw America having to fight for its own freedom. Pick up the story where we left it off.
Yeah, well, this school had a robust history program, and so they were teaching these kids about American history. Mm-hmm. And, of course, they were talking about the Revolutionary War, and they were talking about, the creation of the United States and the principles on which it was founded. And the irony of that, I don't think, was lost on these kids who were sitting in class being taught about, the principles of popular sovereignty and the freedoms that are endemic to the human condition by citizens of a country that was saying, well, except not for you guys,
Yeah.
And I think that really tore at Howard Baskerville's mind, this kind of double life that he was forced to lead for a while, where he was kind of secretly visiting the front, secretly helping out as much as he could, with the revolutionaries, many of whom were his students, while at the same time, going about his business as a missionary and as a teacher, going to Sunday services, putting his head down, trying to do the work that he had come here to do, knowing that if he got caught, he would be thrown out of the country. And that's something that he absolutely didn't want. And, I think that is really kind of what has always drawn me to Baskerville. You and I have talked for a long time. The thing that always animates me, the people that I'm most interested in, historical figures, modern figures, are people who, when confronted with oppression, activate their faith to do something about it. That was my biography of Jesus, right? That's my biography of Muhammad, Prophet Muhammad. And I see that exact same thing here for Baskerville. And I really do see him as sort of a real model, in the modern world for people who do want to do good in the world and who aren't going to let, the color of their skin or the God that they worship or the country that they happen to be born in stop them from doing so.
Oh, now we're headed to where I'm trying to get to. We're headed toward where I want to go with Reza's comments now about Baskerville being a model and about activating your faith when faced with oppression, about solidarity and activism and justice. That's where I'm headed. Let me close with this about Baskerville specifically. I think you've just answered, but let me just give you a chance to to hit it again if you so choose. The question I wanted to ask is ultimately, what do you think Baskerville's legacy is? And I think you may have just answered it, but tell me more.
Near the end of his life, when he had finally, decided that he just couldn't live this double life anymore, and one day he actually stood in front of his students and told them, just confessed, look, I can't ignore the suffering on the streets any longer. The best way that I know how to serve this country that I've come to love, the people that I came here to serve, is to quit my job as a teacher, to abandon my missionary post, and to go join the fight for freedom. And remarkably, when he gave that speech, most of his students stood up and left with him, joined the battlefield with him.
Yeah.
And there was this incredible moment where, as you can imagine, the State Department freaks out about this. No American had joined this conflict, though one thing that I do think is important to understand is that this was an international conflict. There were Russians and Georgians and Armenians and Turks and Arabs. A lot of people from around the world had come to join the Persians in this fight for freedom, but no American.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that now suddenly an American had done so was, as you can imagine, a real boon. It was a big deal for these revolutionaries.
Mm-hmm.
It made international news. It made it impossible to ignore the conflict. And I think Baskerville understood that. The revolution didn't need one more person with a gun. It needed was an American, and that's what he did. Wait, there's this moment near the where the State Department sends an American consul general to the battlefield to basically talk Baskerville out of this. And he says to Baskerville, this isn't your fight. These are not your people. This is not your country. It's time for you to pack up your things and go back home. Or else, that charge of treason is going to be right there.
Mm-hmm.
And Baskerville said what he has become most famous for, the words of his that are the ones that I think, anyone who knows this kid knows these words. He said to the American consul general, he looked around the battlefield, all these people from all over the world who had come here to fight, and he said, the only difference between me and these people is the place of my birth, and that is not a very big difference. And then he handed over his passport and cut off all connections with the U.S. government.
Yeah.
And that right there, right? I mean, that was 116 years ago.
Yeah.
This kid, this 24-year-old kid at the time, who understood what we still have a hard time understanding, which is the place of your birth is a lottery, right? You were born in America. You won the lottery.
That's
okay,
right.
Great.
That's right.
But what does that mean? What then do you owe the rest of the world? Is it true that the suffering of any one person anywhere in the world is the responsibility of all peoples everywhere?
Yeah. I don't. No, I'm sorry.
That's the kid. That's why this kid, I think, is a heroic figure to me and to so many other people.
I don't worship at the altar of Warren Buffett like many do in this country, certainly in the business community. But there's one thing about Warren Buffett that I admire, and I said this to him face to face in a couple of our different meetings. That Warren Buffett is the first to tell you what Reza just said, that the place of your birth is a lottery. Warren Buffett will tell you he does not become the Oracle of Omaha if he is not born in America. So much of the success that Warren Buffett has had, he will tell you up front, is because he won the lottery being born in this country. That said, when we come forward, I want to come to Dr. King, my hero. As many of you, most of you in this audience know, I regard Dr. King, as I've said more times than I can count. You know my line about King. I regard him as the greatest American this country's ever produced. That's my assessment of Dr. King, the greatest American we've ever produced. And when Reza was telling this story a moment ago about this moment that Baskerville has in front of his students in Persia, my mind went to that moment that King had standing at the Riverside Church on the west side of Manhattan. You know where I'm going, and we're going to go there as soon as we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Be sure to like and follow Tavis Smiley at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues when we come forward.
Sunday, June 18th, come out to Africatown in Leimert Park for the Juneteenth Independence Revolution commemoration. The Independence Revolution will be part of a 3-day weekend to celebrate Juneteenth. Join in the national hashtag Wave of Freedom, where Black people across the country will stand in solidarity to demand reparations for Black American descendants of slavery. Hear from the frontline organizations who are fighting for better conditions for Black LA. Bring your dad to be part of the Honor Thy Fathers ceremony, which will acknowledge dozens of Black fathers in the community. See performances from some of LA's top local artists. Shop with a variety of local Black merchants selling food, clothes, art, and more. The Juneteenth Independence Revolution is a free event for the entire family. Sunday, June 18th from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m., come to Africatown in Leimert Park to celebrate Black Independence Day. The Juneteenth Independence Revolution is brought to you by Africatown Enterprise, the African Village Vendors Association at Leimert Park, Black Lives Matter LA, Downtown Crenshaw, and Destination Crenshaw.
Some people won't give you the real talk on drugs, but it's time we know the facts. Fentanyl is killing people. It's a powerful opioid, often made illegally and commonly mixed with illicit drugs. It can even be pressed into counterfeit pills that resemble prescription medications. Just 2 milligrams, about the size of a few grains of sand, could potentially be lethal. This isn't an ad to scare you, but it is an ad to make you think twice. Get the facts. Go to realdealonfentanyl.com. This message is brought to you by the Ad Council.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, we're Tasha,
Kill,
and Euro from KBLA's Lyric Lounge. Check us out every Saturday from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. and every Sunday from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m.
Tune in as we break down some of your favorite song lyrics from all genres of music.
From gospel to pop and hip-hop to rock and everything else in between, we cover it all. So come hang out in the Lyric Lounge with Tasha,
Teal,
and Euro every Saturday afternoon at 4 p.m. and every Sunday at 6 p.m. Let the music play.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Follow the leader. KBLA Talk 1580. Follow the leader.
If you're not following KBLA Talk 1580 on all of our socials, then you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the web at KBLA 1580.
That's right.
Again, you can find all of our socials at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
By the way, if you miss any of our weekday shows in real time, you can always catch up by checking out the podcasts of your favorite shows at your leisure. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Got your black. Follow the leader. Oh my God. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
When I move my body, I feel like freedom.
Malik Books is hosting the Freedom to Read and Write Juneteenth celebration at Westfield Culver City Mall on June 17th from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Come celebrate the freedom to read and write with love, music, children's activities, author readings, book signings, and more. For more information, go to MalikBooks.com. Come celebrate with us at Malik Books. Storytime with Jozo Bozo the Clown. Featured author Anise Rochelle, reading and signing her bestseller, Juneteenth a Book, teaches children about Juneteenth. Anise Rochelle has written 5 books that promote self-love and confidence. Come celebrate at Malik Books. Fun for the whole family. Freedom to read and write the Juneteenth celebration. Our voice matters. For more information, go to MalikBooks.com. Again, MalikBooks.com.
Hey, Jake, can you finish that induction range installation tomorrow?
Orders have really amped up at Nate's Electric.
We need to finish installing it first in Maine. Did we hear back from the grocery chain?
It's no shock he needs electricians, like yesterday.
Smart fridge. Everybody wants one of those these days.
Indeed can help him hire great people fast.
I need Indeed.
Indeed, you do. We instantly connect you with quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job description. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
Find a righteous rage and don't be afraid to say what you see. We're KBLA Talk 1580.
So, Reza Aslan, as you were telling that story about Howard Baskerville standing in front of his students in Persia and telling them that he could no longer, avoid this calling that he was feeling to join the struggle in solidarity with them, my mind went to MLK and standing at the Riverside Church in Manhattan to give his Beyond Vietnam speech, which, as you know, I've written a book about this, put a target on his back, and literally 1 year to the day later, they killed Dr. King. He gives that speech Beyond Vietnam on April 4, 1967. He tells America, "You, America, are the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today." And for that, they put a target on his back and literally killed him 1 year to the day, almost 1 year to the hour later in Memphis. But that is the crime that Dr. King committed, for which he had to pay ultimately with his life. But King stands in that church and says, "I come to this place tonight because my conscience leaves me no other choice." My conscience leaves me no other choice. King had that moment. Baskerville had that moment. And I want to come back to this notion you raised earlier about what we do in our lives with Baskerville and King as models when we face oppression and we are challenged to activate our faith. We are challenged to accept that advocacy is not a spectator sport. We are challenged to accept that unless we speak the truth that we know, then the suffering gets rendered invisible. Talk to me, Reza.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because after he had joined the revolution and during a battle in order to break a siege against the city and to bring food and medical equipment, and he was shot in the heart and killed next to his students. Afterwards, a lot of people in America, especially in the State Department, were trying to figure out what the heck just happened and how to explain it. And there were all kinds of rumors. It's funny that you were talking about, quote unquote, his conversion. One of the biggest rumors was that he had converted to Islam because people couldn't figure out why this 24-year-old kid would have sacrificed himself, why he would have given up all that privilege that he had, his American citizenship, and to have died for somebody else's freedom, a country, a people that he had nothing in common with on the surface. There were all kinds of, rumors out there to try to figure this out, when in reality, the simplest answer, because he thought it was the right thing to do, because he thought his faith because he thought it's what Jesus would have done, was right there, but it was impossible, I think, for people to accept it, because to accept it, they would have been forced to think beyond their own individual identity, their own tribal membership, right, their own clan, and to think as humans, and to actually have to wrestle with the responsibility that they would have for others like this. And I think that's really where this is coming from. That's where the real connection is, right, that between Dr. King and Baskerville and so many people who are willing to sacrifice themselves, not just for, the benefit of their own group, but for all of humanity. Yeah. And, there's the reason why these are still people who we follow and that we learn about. And obviously everybody at this point knows about Martin Luther King, but my hope is that more and more people learn about Howard Baskerville as well.
Yep. I'm not asking people to take a bullet like Baskerville or King. I am asking them to recognize, as I said earlier, that advocacy for those things you believe in is not a spectator sport. You got to get off the sideline and get involved. Right. Let me just ask you, I'm looking at my clock here. We just got about 4 minutes left in this hour. Just broadly speaking, give me your critique of the lack of solidarity in the pursuit of justice in this country, to make America a nation as good as its promise, hopefully at some point. But solidarity is is hard to find these days in a country that can't even get to civility. You can't get to solidarity if you can't get to civility. That's my read. But tell me where you think we are in this country in terms of all the people that we're going to need to work in harmony and in some solidarity to make this experiment, as I call it, in democracy one day a real democracy. That's my read.
For some reason, we have fallen under this mistaken idea that freedom is a zero-sum game, that equality is a zero-sum game, that if certain people within our society, marginalized, oppressed people, gain the same rights and freedoms and privileges that the majority do, that somehow those freedoms get taken away from the majority. And the absurdity of that is clear on its face, right? But I think that's where we are right now. I think it's so hard to get solidarity, particularly from white, wealthy people of privilege who truly do believe that if a black person or if a brown person or if an Asian person achieves the same level of rights and privileges they do, somehow that takes it away from them. But of course, that's not the case. That freedom is universal. Rights are universal. They apply to all people or they apply to no one. And I think that's the biggest lesson that we need to learn as a country, especially right now in this time of great divide.
Yeah. How do you square what you've just said? How do you juxtapose what you've just said with a Supreme Court that every day is giving us rulings in the month of June that speak to their view of shrinking rights rather than expanding rights?
Well, it's by design.
Yeah.
It's exactly by design. You know, we've spent the last decade making sure that this is precisely the kind of Supreme Court that maintains a kind of, a status quo, right? That people in positions of privilege do not want to give up in any way, precisely because they think somehow it will remove their rights or their privileges. I don't know. This is a generational fight right now, Tavis, as you know. It's hard when we're looking at what's going on right now to be in any way optimistic.
Yeah.
But I do think that, as Obama tells us all the time, think about the long arc and have that kind of perspective. And sometimes it's hard, but it's what we got to do.
Well, I always make a distinction. You are a professor of these things. I always make a distinction between optimism and hope. Optimism suggests there's something you can see, feel, or touch that gives you reason to believe that things are going to get better. Hope just you move even when you don't have the evidence, right? You can't see it, but you keep hope alive, as Jesse Jackson might say. Reza Aslam, brilliant scholar, Emmy and Peabody nominated, best-selling author. His latest text is called "An American Martyr in Persia: The Epic Life and Tragic Death of Howard Baskerville." Enjoyed this immensely, Reza. Thanks for your time. We'll do it again, my friend.
Anytime, Tavis. Anytime.
All the best to you. Hour 3 of Tavis Smiley after news, traffic, and sports on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Inflation is slowing. May's